Welcome back, everybody, and it's time for another one of those incredible home-style dinners. We hit you with one of these back in August with the chicken tenders and the Cajun mac, and honestly, that was one of the new favorites in the house. And if you haven't seen that episode, there'll be a card floating around and a link in the description. Today, we're going to be coming at you with the most incredible spaghetti and meatballs. You've never seen spaghetti and meatballs quite like this. I made this for the first time at my mom's birthday get together last year. And while that was incredible, there was some definite need for improvement in the recipe. And this is what we're doing tonight. We're making everything from scratch outside of the garlic bread that's going to be used for the garlic cheesy bread. We're making a very special spaghetti and meatballs sauce. So with that being said, there's a lot of components put together for this. So let's get to prep. So for the best meatballs possible, we need the best beef possible, and this is 1.5 pounds of that freshly ground 70/30 ground beef that we did back in September for viewer request month, and to that we're going to be adding in 1.5 pounds of ground pork. And if you haven't seen that steak burger video from back in September, there's a card floating around and a link in the description. You really need to see it. So we're going to combine it by hand until it is nice and homogeneous. Then we're going to add in 1 teaspoon of kosher salt and then some coarsely ground black pepper to taste, and then we're just going to fold all of this in with our hands until everything is thoroughly combined, and then we're going to put it to the side and work on our binder, which starts with these breadcrumbs. In this container is 2 cups of regular unseasoned plain breadcrumbs, and then we're going to wake it up with some flavor. In this bowl is 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper, the pre-ground stuff will work, 1 teaspoon of basil, 1 teaspoon of oregano, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, and 1/2 teaspoon of red chili flakes. And then we're going to mix that together until everything is nice and combined. And then we're going to add in some liquid. This is 1/2 cup of milk. Now, I know you guys like to use eggs for your meatballs as a binder, and you can most certainly do that, but I've always used milk. It helps retain the moisture inside the meat and creates a perfect binder while adding richness. So we're going to be adding this milk in batches, stirring constantly, making sure everything gets well hydrated. You don't want this to be soupy. You want to make kind of like a breadcrumb paste. You can still mold this inside of your hands like clay. And once you've gotten it to that right consistency, we're going to go ahead and start making a well inside of our beef and pork mixture. And it should look something like this. And you guessed it, next thing in is that beautifully hydrated breadcrumb mixture. And after that's all nice and inside of our well, we're going to go ahead and start folding this in by hand, making sure that that breadcrumb mixture is evenly distributed inside of our meat. We do not want any bald spots. This is how it should look. And now we're going to go ahead and start making our meatballs. We're going for a smaller size meatball, something less than the size of an average golf ball, kind of like what you see here. Now, Italian spaghetti and meatballs are the size of jelly beans, and that's not going to do anything for me. And I'm also not a fan of the American giant spaghetti and meatballs. I'm a believer that they should be enjoyed together, so a smaller type meatball like this is going to work. And yes, you see me counting these guys off. This provided me with 28 beautiful meatballs, so let's head to the stove and get cooking. And this is the secret to making the ultimate spaghetti and meatballs. We're going to be working on the meatballs and the sauce at the same time. You'll see why later. And after we have layered our nice large skillet with meatballs, leaving just enough room for them to breathe and cook properly, we're going to let them sear off for about 3 minutes. And in the opposite pan, over a medium-high heat, we're going to go ahead and add in 1 large, finely shredded sweet onion. And we want to go ahead and get that sweating off. And then, as we always do, we're going to hit it up with a nice layer of kosher salt to help these guys break down. And you may be wondering why I'm using the forbidden pan again after it almost caused me tragedy. And that's because the only thing it can cook properly these days is a pan sauce, so this is going to work perfectly. And normally I would tell you guys to let these sweat off for about 9 minutes until they're broken down, but we're going to caramelize these onions this time, and you'll see why later on. So after 3 minutes, we have a beautiful looking crust on the bottom of our meatballs. So we're just going to turn them over, and since this is starting to cook a little more quickly, we're going to let the other side cook off for 2 minutes. And after that, as you can see, we're already starting to get some caramelization, so I'm going to turn down the heat and add some extra virgin olive oil to the pan to prevent anything from sticking or burning. And then we're going to continue to stir these off until the pan temp goes down. And then we're going to continue cooking them for about another 3 to 4 minutes, or until they've become a full, deep, beautiful golden brown color. And at this time, our meatballs are ready to roll, so we're going to pull them off the heat and take a look at that guy. It's absolutely beautiful. So we're going to place them on a large size baking sheet and then put on another round of meatballs. And as you can see, in the time it took me to do all of that, my onions became fully caramelized. It happened very quickly. So all I'm doing is adding in 2 teaspoons of minced garlic, and then we're just going to sweat that off for about 30 seconds or until you start to smell them and become fragrant. And this is the next thing. This is Cinto concentrated San Marzano tomato paste, and we're going to add a tablespoon of that right in. And then we're going to go ahead and start stirring it in, making sure that all of our beautiful onions and garlic are covered by this. And then we're going to let this roll for about 45 seconds or until completely toasted and caramelized. You do not realize how much flavor this is going to add. And then we're going to go in with our 28-ounce can of San Marzano tomatoes that I've crushed by hand, and then we're going to get that worked in. And then we're going to thin this out just slightly by adding in 3/4 of a cup of water. This is not going to dilute the flavor at all. Keep in mind, we have a lot of meatballs and pasta to cover, so this is going to make sure our sauce goes the distance. And then after that, we're going to add in 2 teaspoons of dried oregano, and then we're going to get that nice and combined, and then we're going to let this bad boy simmer off covered for 10 minutes. And then as you can see, after about a minute or two, my meatballs are done cooking and they're off the heat. So we're going to switch things out and start working on our pasta water. And we're going to stir this sauce about halfway through at the 5-minute mark. And after 10 minutes, you can see we're already starting to reduce the sauce some. And this is where I'm going to start seasoning it. And all this is 1 teaspoon of kosher salt and some freshly cracked black pepper here. Now, normally I wait till the very end to season this, but we're doing something incredibly different. Normally, whenever I make meatballs, I sear them off in the pan first and finish them in the oven. Today, we're going to be finishing them off in the sauce, which is going to bring this to the next level. This is going to be a 25-minute pan sauce like always, but in the last 15 minutes, those meatballs are going to braise off in the sauce. Kind of like a Sunday sauce sort of deal from a traditional Italian standpoint. This is my version that takes less time. And after we've gotten all of our beautiful meatballs completely submerged in the sauce, we're going to put a lid on it and let it simmer undisturbed for 10 minutes. There's going to be something special that I do in the last 5. And after about a minute or two of simmering these meatballs, my pasta water is boiling and ready for spaghetti, so we're just going to simply cook this pasta to packaged instructions. And the long-awaited 10-minute time period is up, and take a look at that sauce. Those meatballs are adding some serious umami. Everything smells good and looks amazing. So the only thing we're going to do, the final finishing touch to this, is to add in about 4 leaves of fresh basil that are finely chopped, and we're going to get that gently pushed down into the sauce. And after we've done that, we're going to let it simmer for its final 5 minutes. And guys, I cannot wait for this to be done because the smells are insane in this kitchen. And now that our sauce is done, we're switching gears yet again to work on our garlic butter. So in a sauce pot over medium-high heat, all I'm doing is melting down 1 stick of unsalted butter. And to that, we're going to be adding in 1 teaspoon of kosher salt, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, and 1 teaspoon of parsley. We're going to get that thoroughly combined, and then we're just going to let this cook with the butter for a few seconds until it's fragrant and all the oils have infused with the butter. And then we're going to put it on this beautiful loaf of garlic bread. Now, I know a lot of you guys like to use compound butter with garlic in it, and that's fine. You can do that if you want. But the benefits to adding a melted garlic butter to this French bread is, since it's already in liquid form, it seeps in deeper into the bread, and then when it bakes, even under all that cheese, you get these crispy, garlicky, salty kind of bites that you just don't get with a compound butter. But you do you. So after we've gotten our beautiful Picasso picture painted with this beautiful garlic butter, we're going to go ahead and top each half with freshly shredded mozzarella cheese. This is an 8-ounce block of mozzarella cheese that I've grated by hand. And once we have appropriately snowed over both halves of our beautiful garlic bread, we're going to go on top with a finishing layer of some finely shredded Parmigiano Reggiano cheese. And then after we've gotten that covered, we're going to give it a nice, healthy garnish of parsley. Then we're going to slam it into the oven on 350 degrees Fahrenheit and let it cook for about 15 minutes until all the cheese is fully melted and we have a beautifully golden brown, crispy exterior. So right before I made the garlic bread, our pasta was finished cooking, so I strained it, reserving 1 cup of pasta water, which you just saw me use. And this is going to help our pasta become one thing. So after we've gotten a little bit of that pasta water in, we're going to go ahead and start adding in a little bit of our sauce and meatballs. And then we're going to very delicately, with a pair of tongs, kind of twirl this pasta together, trying to keep the meatballs as intact as possible. And don't worry if a few of yours end up crumbling. A couple of mine did. It's not necessarily a bad thing. And honestly, with a couple of these crumbled up, it kind of gives you the best of both worlds. The crumbled meatballs kind of gives you that spaghetti and meat sauce vibe. Then you get the whole meatballs, and it's, I don't know, something about that variation in textures is just really homey and comforting, and I really enjoy it that way. Alright, and as you can see, the pasta is actually picking up a lot of the sauce, and everything is kind of coming together like it should. So I don't need any more water, so we're going to put in the rest of our remaining meatballs. And take a look at that, guys. Ain't she a beauty? I want to give it one last twirl to combine, and then we're going to plate it. And come on, guys, you can't tell me that ain't the sexiest serving of spaghetti and meatballs you've ever seen in your life. Alright, guys, and that is it. Another incredible home-style dinner down in the books, guys. There's never a bad time for spaghetti and meatballs, but when it's cooler, this is something warm and comforting. Inexpensive to make, honestly, but it does take about an hour and 20 minutes to put everything together. That being said, the reward will be right at the end. Alright, star of the show. It's time for the spaghetti and meatballs. Ooh. Oh, man. I can tell you, this is already light years better than the spaghetti we had last year. Sorry, Mom, but without mistakes, without challenges, there is no progress. Now, that being said, the very first draft of this was unbelievably good, and we all enjoyed it, myself included. But more seasoning, better ingredients. Perfectly cooked meatballs. The umami factor is out of this world. This is what it should have been. Not sure if you guys can hear that crunch in HD, but super phenomenal. Get a little bit of everything together. Maybe. Maybe. Mmm. 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 Whatever. This works. It's clean. Even if you're not grinding your own meat, putting together something like this very, very thoughtfully is a great treat for your family, great for the weekend. Or if you're a stay-at-home mom or dad that does the cooking for the family, or if you're like me and you just like to cook, this is great. It does take about 1.5 hours to get everything together, but you're not going to find anything near as good anywhere else. 15 out of 10, fresh ingredients, good stuff. And again, hint, hint, if you want to see me make some French bread, maybe very soon, don't forget to hit that like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.